What's up guys, back for another video. Today we're going to do a drive-by-wire conversion on the Chaser. So just got in the rest of these parts. You have a Bosch drive-by-wire pedal, a bracket and plug kit from Golby's, and then we have an additional plug for our throttle body, which is from ProWire. So if you need the connector number there's that. I had the flange welded onto our manifold the other day. Crappy eBay manifold, didn't weld the best, so we're not going to get too much of a zoom on that, but that's all set with a billet adapter to go to the HD clamp. So we're still waiting on our engine. Hopefully pick that up this week if they give us a call, but we can still kind of route it. It's going to come around here and we can make kind of a flying lead, send it through our firewall hole, and just got everything pre-wired so it's ready to go when the engine gets back in here. So we'll start down at the pedal end and get that all mounted and do that wiring end first. Alright, so pedal side, pretty simple. You just have these two 10 mils here. And kind of pop these out. I already undid our cable up top. I got rid of the throttle cable. So this is just hopefully be pretty simple when it comes to getting the bracket on. So then we'll just match up that and see where everything lines up and get the bracket in. So we need two hands for this, but you'll take the bracket the long way, and it's going to be these two bottom bolts that are going to go where the factory pedal mount went. And it looks like the two elongated ones up top will be going to where the cable routed through for additional support. So we'll see if we can get a good enough grip on this. Put everything through. Maybe these bolts are a little too short, so we'll take our factory bolts and see how that fits. Maybe their test car didn't have the matting behind it, or if it's meant to be removed. So as when you're tightening up anything, you don't want to put one thing too tight right off the bat. You want to get all your bolts lined up first, and then it'll be a lot easier to tighten it up without having to do any wiggling around. Okay, so the supplied hardware in there definitely was not up to par. I had to find two slightly longer bolts to get in there without like cutting up all the like sound deadening material. And then used their bolts, just got everything lightly fit up, and then just kind of cinch all that down. And then I gotta get in there with a ratchet for that one. And then these ended up being an 8mm for what I had, but it's like it was just too short to be able to get these in properly, which I'm sure you can swap one out at a time for their supplied ones, but it's not a big deal. Once it's already in, it'll be bolted down. Now we got a Guten tight spec right there. And then all the pre-threaded holes on the bracket are for the bolting the pedal up. So for the pedal, there's one here, one here, one here, and one here. I'm sure you'd be good with 3 of them if you can't really get to this one, but we'll see when we get to it. Okay, so another small issue with the kit. Let's see if we can see it. There's this small kind of box right above the pedal, and if you have everything bolted up, I don't know if you guys can see up there. then you probably won't be able to get the plug in. So I'm gonna make the flying lead first, plug it in, and then route it into the center console area where the ECU is at, and then I'll finish bolting up the pedal. So it started with this bottom left bolt, and then we'll just get the two top ones. Okay, so I had to take a brief intermission, got some new wire because I was out of everything. Got this from ProWire USA, and then we're getting the pin out for the pedal connector. So everything is always usually looking from the back, so if you could see that it's kind of embossed on the top here. This is going to be our pin out, so I don't know why this looks crooked. 1 and 2 are both 5 volt, 3 and 5 are both sensor ground, and then our outputs from the pedal to the ECU would go to an input on the ECU is going to be 4 and 6. So we could splice together both of these and make this one 4-pin connector, and then we can just make basically one big pigtail with like a Deutsch connector and make it removable, so that way if we ever have to pull the engine harness, it's a bit easier to set this up. I lost my tripod mount, so I'm just gonna set it up on kind of like a section mount. Hope everything fits fine and gives a good view. First, you just want to kind of get your first wire length and kind of make it how long you want. I'll just kind of set it like around 6 foot, just kind of arm's length height. And then when we take all the other ones, so I'm just going to use this color for our ground. I'm going to make a splice to make it shorter, so we don't need full lengths for the rest of the ground, for the other ground. And then I'll probably do, actually I have black here as well. So it doesn't really matter what wire colors you use, but as long as you have enough different ones to make it easy to differentiate, unless you want to continuity test everything back at the connector when you're done. So pretty simple, just take all your colors. I'll just use the black for the ground, and we'll use white for our 5 volt then. Or green for 5 volt, white for a sensor. It doesn't matter. So once you got all that, so as long as it's pretty close, and then you can essentially just terminate all your pins on here, which is what we're going to do first, and then we'll add the heat shrink and the sleeving at the end. Okay, so you get your wire stripped. The little boots go in this direction, because on the pins there's a spot for the wire and then a spot for the boot, so it stays seated, and you just kind of push it in there. And when you get your crimpers, you just need to find the correct size for the wire that you're using. Ours is probably going to be this E slot here, and you just make sure that that's crimped. And even when you're splicing wires together, you always want to use crimps, because that is going to have a cold weld to the wire so that it doesn't come off. If you try to solder things, which you wouldn't do on a pin, but it's susceptible to heat and vibration, and then you can just have your wiring connections fail like that. So you just put it in like this, and then if you take the back of your connector, so pin 3, it should just slide in whichever direction the pin goes. So it goes in kind of sideways. So this one will be pin 3, and and then you just kind of push the back of the boot in there. So I'll just do the rest and I'll show you guys how to do the splices. Okay, so I ended up using both purples for our output/inputs, and the green is going to be our 5-volt, and our black is our sensor ground. So what you do is you kind of terminate these. You can do whatever length you want. Strip one end, and then we're going to make another strip partway down the wire where this is at. You just want to make sure it lines up pretty well. And you just kind of go on one side, and then give it a little bit of room, and go over here. And then when you strip it, you'll just be able to either use a razor blade or your finger to kind of peel away the insulation. So then you have removed wire part way down. You don't have to make any extra cuts. And then we'll get a splice terminal to crimp this in, and we'll just run our heat shrink down the length of the wire, and then we can loom everything once these are put together. So then we have these open barrel splices here, and again these will cold weld when you crimp them together. So you just kind of find whichever size again will work best for you, and then these just kind of go into the die. And sometimes it's kind of hard to do with, since these ones I have aren't ratcheting, but you can get ratcheting ones. And then you just go in and crimp these down, and then if you want you can kind of just do it again to be sure, and then just do a tug test. Your wires aren't going to come out. You could take your heat shrink, go down the length of the one wire, and then you just put it on like so, and then you have a clean splice and you don't have a full thickness harness. So we just take our, you can use a heat gun, torch. If you use a torch, just use low heat and kind of go lightly over it until you see it melt or shrink, and then that's all it takes. So I'll do the other 5-volt reference off camera, and then I'll just show you the looming and main heat shrinking portion, and terminating the end to a Deutsch connector so we can splice it into the car easier. Alright, so you just kind of cut your looming to length. I left a little bit, that way we have room on each side for if we have to deep-end the connectors for whatever reason. And then you just take your main bundle, and you want to twist it together a little bit to make it easier. This end was the factory end, so we have to cut this as well. And you just kind of start feeding them in, and once you get the main bunch in, it just kind of all slides over. And then if you kind of get bunched up, you kind of find where it is in the harness. You push it one way, and then you just do this, and this is gonna feed it down in. Once you bunch it up, watch the bottom, you let go and it shoots down. So if you ever get hung up on the looming, that's just the easy way to do it. And then it kind of wraps back down. Yeah, wiring in general is pretty simple. It's just everyone kind of overestimates it. All it really is just you connect the dots. Just a little more. Just getting hung up on our splice area. One wire. Yeah, that's the only thing is like if it catches partway down the harness, you gotta just play with it until the wires get in there, but you can also just mess with your heat shrinking and put the extra little bit in there. So then we have this big pack of heat shrinking. I think I just got this set off eBay. That I ran out, and just kind of find the size you need. stick it on. So I think we're gonna go with our 5/16. Looks like it should fit pretty well. We don't need anything too long, so we can just cut this in half and just feed it over our main loop again. Yeah, so this should be a perfect size because it just fits over the heat shrink. If you go too big, it's not going to get like a better grip on it. And then this gives us a little bit more coverage down at the main loom of the harness. You can set as much over it as you want. I'll just leave a little bit for depinning. And again, we take our torch. I don't feel like taking out the heat gun. And then you can just see it start melting to the point. You don't want to get too hot if you're doing it this method near the looming, because you can easily just melt a hole in the looming. And then it just depends what heat shrink you're using too, if it's like dual wall or if it has like an adhesive in it, how hot you have to get it and how much heat it can take. I don't expect this stuff to be too good, but just for like a general sub harness we're making, this isn't like a motorsport type deal where it's a sealed connector. So this end is good, and then we can just take our other end, retrim our ends so they're all the same, and then we can put our other end of heat shrink over this before we put on our other pins and connector. So if you forget that, then you're just gonna run into a little pickle. So same deal, I'll get these stripped out and then show you how the Deutsch connectors work. Okay, so here are other connectors we're gonna use. And this is just like an MSD kit. So these pins use the same type of crimp style that we're using. If you have a normal, like genuine connector, which I don't have any of the pins on hand here, they use a whole different type of crimper, and the crimper is going to cost you $400, $500, $600. So this is like a more cost-effective way, which I do have that crimper, but as far as just using up this kit before we order the proper connectors for further use. So then these just get crimped on the same way, and then you want to use the male pins on the female connectors and then the female pins on the male connectors. Alright, so our pins are connected on, and all these do is just feed in the back. So I'm just going to pick whichever pinout I want on the Deutsch side, but we know our first connection is purple red and our second for the signals is purple yellow. So I'm just gonna keep those easy on the 1 and 2 pins. So purple red will just slide on in the top, and then you'll hear a click, and then you know that one is seated. And then we put our second one in there. Sometimes the tabs on the back of those pins are kind of catch, and then we'll do our other ones. It doesn't really matter where you put it as long as it matches on the other end. So we'll just put our 5 volt in pin 4, and then our sensor ground in pin 3. So this one did not really go in that well, and it's catching on this. So we just have to maybe crimp this section down a little bit better. That way it just doesn't move. I want it as circular as possible, but with these cheaper connectors, which they technically are, not the normal Deutsch. See, now we get it. So then there are these pin locks in here, which this connector gets this green one, and then it just kind of drops down, which is kind of hard to show you and do it at the same time. This just gets kind of put in this empty slot here and push down, and all your pins will line up. Just kind of needed to get a screwdriver in there. Sometimes the pins will go a little crooked, so you just have to straighten them out, and that's what the pin lock looks like when it goes in there, or the wedge, whatever you want to call it. And then you just put your heat shrink over again and heat shrink it down. Take our torch again, give it minimal heat so you can just barely see the flame. And this is just a little quicker than letting the heat gun warm up. Although obviously you have normal risk of using a fire. When you apply it more direct, it just shrinks a little quicker, but then it's just more risk to melting your looming that you just spent all that time on doing. So now our sub harness is complete. Pretty nice. So now we can install this into the car and then finish mounting our pedal. And if it's a little long, it doesn't matter. We can route it and tuck it a lot easier, but this should definitely be enough length to get to the ECU. Alright, so the zinc bolts here that they supplied are just barely too short. So I went and picked up some new ones. These are going to be an M6 by 1.0 by 40, and that should definitely be enough to get everything started in there. There's just still this box up here that you can't really move it too easily. The white one with the two blue things on it, and that's like butted right up against the lower cowl. So we're just going to try to put one bolt in the bottom left here. Alright, so now you can see pedal is mounted up. I use these socket caps because then you could use like a radial head socket to get in there. And then I just have the sub harness routed right here right now. And then I can either route that like above the little foot plastics here or on the back. I'll see what it works best. But as far as the pedal work, should all be done now. Let's see if I can skip. And that works as it should. I probably have to move this floor mat, but either way you can calibrate your position. So even if I leave it here, this is 0% and that's 100, so you can pretty much make it work however you want. And then inside the ECU there's like a throttle map that you can set up as well. All right, so now we're getting to our throttle body wiring. So we have our plug here, there are pins and boots. Have our 6 wires. I'm just going to use 2 whites and continuity test for drive-by-wire motor. So this is going to be our pin out. So we have, again, 2 TPS inputs. We have a 5-volt signal ground and then both motor positive and negative. So I'm going to just follow the same thing with my green being my 5-volt, black being sensor ground. My 2 purples are analogs, and then the drive-by-wire motors. So this same deal as last time, you crimp these on and then they just click in, and then we loom it up and put our Deutsch connector on. We have 6 pins for this one, and same idea. Okay, so I ended up having to disassemble the connector here. There's these weird little green locks that have to slide in, so it's just kind of easier to get it out of the way. And I was having little issues. The pin started to mushroom a bit, but you need to make sure you get the audible click, which this one, see how it's not going all the way in, but the other 2 you can kind of see the slot at the bottom there. We'll just need to kind of compress this more. It's likely kind of just at the end here where we're having the issue. And I just pulled all the little boot sections back too, but so you get that click. I don't have the proper hydraulic crimper from Bosch to do this, and then that's why I pulled all the boots back. So this all goes like this, and then you can just kind of slide the boots back forward and just kind of do something like that. If you want, you can like use potting resin if you really want it sealed. But then the rest of the connector you'll feed back up through here. If you want to keep the numbers labeled. I think I did break part of it taking it apart, but if you be a little more careful on yours, then you won't have that issue. And then you just feed back over all the wires. So I got a little tangle here. Straighten it out. And then we're gonna do the same thing with the looming once we get the connector back together. So make sure you do it coming from this way so that the wires are still in the back portion. Otherwise, if you do it backwards, obviously you have to redo it. So we know our things labeled 1, 2, 3, and our grounds and 5 volt is on this side. So yeah, so I may just need to end up changing the connector body portion. It's a little loose now, but it's all finished, and now we can just loom it up and do the rest later if we need to. It's just going to be on a Deutsch connector, which we can depin at any point. Alright, so I made the sub harness. I'm going to show you pinning in this because I did the same way as the last one. Doesn't really matter what you pick as long as you know what everything is and how it goes in. So I heat shrinked everything, left enough to depin as needed. This set a little more because I can always just repin it here. This is a lot easier to mess with than this funky connector. So we could just run this in the engine bay, run it down to the ECU, and start making sub harnesses on the ECU end to pin this in and test everything. Alright, so we have all this pulled out. Because obviously if you have standalone, you should be at this point already. This car has a Link Fury X. So we are going to unlock this and show you guys what we're working with. So on our B loop, either way, and then we just take our AN volt ports and use what's needed. We have to take out the old CPS if we don't have enough. When I see what we get into, how many I know we have left. I know we have enough, but you can use any and you just assign them as needed. So I'll just make some pigtails that come off of this with the Deutsch connectors. We have our one bay now, and then this is the one. Getting through all this stuff, if you pulled your harness in a JZX without removing all your blower motor stuff, it's a little bit of a pain, but it is what it is. So just as quick note here too, these little white things right there, if you can see, you just push that in and it locks the whole connector. These pins will just pull out if you need to depin anything, and I'll show you how the pinning works. Very simple. You just take your wire, put on same type of crimp style, but it's just a different pin type. It's a Super Seal 1.0, and you just push that in, and you kind of feel a detent when you need to pull it out. You just kind of pull a little hard. You shouldn't break it as long as your crimp's good, and then it goes like that. So you do a little tug test, and now we have our little leads here. And if you ever, when you're done, you just push these down back at the top, and same deal. So I'm just going to have to find our free available AN volt ports, and then our 5 volt and sensor ground, and then make terminations for those. So this would be the example of like the inline split. So this is our 5 volt wire, and you want to make sure to note to put the direction or the wires in the correct direction. That way if you slide on your heat shrink, the heat shrink does not get caught up, and it will cover all the splice of the wires like so. So then we're going to do one of these for the ground too, and then we can just simply pop it right back into the connector, and then we have 2 additional 5 volt leads for both sub harnesses. So you can get a better view there. I don't know how it looked. Alright, so we have one sub harness down, so we have all of our wires here. This comes to this connector, so this will plug into here. We left plenty of extra length so we can kind of route everything back under the dash where it goes. So then we just have these 5-volt and ground for the other one, and then I just have to find 2 other analog inputs for the pedal. So I have that running through there, and then this is plenty of length too. So we can just kind of sort everything that goes in there. There's not too much room under there. You kind of just stick the ECU under there. The stock one's kind of just a big square and it slots in and bolts to the trans tunnel. But this is a wiring unit, so it's not specifically meant to just fit in there, but it still does fit too. And we just have some bulky old radio wiring, which I haven't gotten into yet. This is the radio that came with the car. I probably end up switching it, but for now, we're just doing this drive-by-wire stuff. Back up. We're just leaving it out here for testing purposes. Get this one hooked back up. Can't forget that. This is our pedal sub harness and our drive-by-wire sub harness. And then the manifold and the throttle body and the engine bay. And then we'll just be able to configure our inputs and then test them. Alright, and now when you get into your ECU, you'll have to enable your e-throttle mode. And we'll just get this all set up. And then our outputs is 9 and 10. We don't have a relay set up, so I believe it should just automatically trigger, and then we just have to go to our configs, and then we can see our 8-volt 3 and 7 is for our pedal. You see both of those moving at once. So we just have to configure those under our analog inputs. Or actually our e-throttle. Oh. So there's throttle position sensor and accelerator position sensor. So then we just have to set our sources. So 8-volt 3 and 7. And then we just set all these up. Pedals down, or actually I just did that incorrect. So that's full, and then you release it, and then it's complete. So now you see it's kind of, yeah, so it's going in between there, and then we just have to set up our throttle position sensor, which is going to be the ones on the actual e-throttle. And I believe, let's see if I check my phone again, we used 8-volt 8 and 9. 8 and 9. And then once you get past your drive-by-wire calibration, then that should all be good. And there's no H bridge, so I just have to set up the other outputs, the auxiliaries, real quick and get that all set. Okay, so I just had to get I don't know how they wired it before, but there wasn't a separate e-throttle relay, so I just assigned an auxiliary output that I wasn't using, and I needed a power cycle for some reason, but now it's all calibrated. So I'll just do the calibration for you guys again. You just go to ECU setup and TPS setup. You hit OK, it will start calibrating, and you'll see the throttle start moving. It just cycles, and then it's calibrated. You hit close, and if you want to use it while the car is not running, you'll need to have it in run when stalled mode, but kind of do all that. So right now it's set up on like a 1-to-1, and it feels just like a normal. Very responsive. If I can try to get like a wide view so you can see how quick it goes. And then that's pretty much it. Obviously there's all these errors because the engine's not in, nothing else is hooked up. But other than that, it's working, and I can now set up the idle parameters so it can idle easier, but I'm just going to turn it back on quiet throttle, and it's not going to open when it's in quiet throttle mode. But then you can set up like your idle parameters, and you'll just go mode, and you can do open or close loop. I set up everything in closed, and your actuator type will be e-throttle. Not sure if you can see the screen, but you just set it to e-throttle and leave it up to if you want to try to mess with it or your tuner. But this is just the main stuff and what you have to do. and there we are. So there we are with our drive-by-wire setup. If you guys have any other questions for how to do it, if I missed anything, which I think I got it all, but other than that, any further videos, if you need anything made for anything else on the car, I think we'll be doing an 8 HP swap. This car, maybe the S13 as well, but that's pretty much it as far as what's planned. We have turbo swap, resealing the motor, and a few other things, but we have to get this engine back together first and get this driving, and then we can get our other lighting up too. But it'd be kind of hard to make like a lighting video if you guys want to see like those hexagon lights. But yeah, that's gonna be it for today's video, guys. See you next time.